everyone, my name is Kudzie Mapiye, and on this channel I do videos about my life living here in Australia, and I also share different life lessons that I've learned along the way. I also offer one-on-one coaching services for all current and potential migrants. So if you're interested to find out more about those services, please click in the description box below to visit my website and find out more information. In today's video, I want to talk about something that has been a lifelong struggle, and I feel like a lot of Africans struggle with this. And for me, ever since I've been African, which is over 3 decades, I've been struggling with this problem, and it's something that I think sometimes stands in the way of good networking, stands in the way of building relationships, just connecting to people in your environment. And I've got a recent example that happened to me last week that I'll share with you, and just to highlight this problem, and I'll just talk more about my observations, how it has affected me, and then some things that I have tried and I have seen to have worked to help me. And I say Africans because there are so many Africans that I meet that tell me that they struggle with the same thing, and so many Africans that I've met here in Australia, they tell me the same struggle. So last week I was at a function at my son's school, and they decided to surprise one of the students. It was her birthday, so they decided to sing happy birthday. So one of the teachers came up and said, I'll just say, I'll just call her Sally for the purposes of this video. They're like, oh, today is also Sally's birthday, so we're going to sing happy birthday to Sally. So we started to sing happy birthday. It was, we're all excited for her, and she was standing at the front, and happy birthday, up until that point where they say, in that happy birthday song, happy birthday to you, and then you have to insert the name of that person. And by the time we got to that point, I had already forgotten the name. I had already forgotten this child's name, and the teacher had stood up and said it's Sally's birthday, but by the time we got to that point in the happy birthday song where we had to say her name, I had already forgotten the name. And I noticed that I kept quiet, and everyone who was in that in the hall said Sally. I'm like, how did you guys remember her name? And so it's something that it's always showing up, and that's forgetting people's names. I don't know, for as long as I can remember, I have never been good at remembering people's names. If I'm not conscious about it, it's something that really just is an ongoing struggle. And I find that sometimes, even with other moms at school, or it could be even at work, where you meet someone for the first time, maybe someone you work with, and you say, my name is, you introduce yourselves, they say their name, you say your name, and then you start talking and you see each other here and there, and every time they see you, they're like, hi Nicolle. And I'm just like, hi, because I've forgotten the name. And it's so embarrassing to then ask the person who remembers your name to say, excuse me, can you remind me your name? That's very embarrassing. And there are times that I've had to do that. I'm like, you know what, I keep on talking to this person, and it's not okay to just keep saying hi and not actually saying their name. I have to just humble myself and ask them to remind me what their name is. And I always cringe because I'm like, man, this person remembers my name. What's so hard? We exchanged names at the same time. How come I can't seem to remember what their name is? And I also noticed that it was a habit of mine, to not address people on a first name basis, just to say, or you're saying hi to a group of, maybe they're just a group of people, you just say hi or morning, if you're at work or whatever. And I think for me it stems from even cultural upbringing and stuff like that. in my culture in Zimbabwe, like being on a first name basis with someone is not something that is very common, especially if they're people who are older than you. Like people usually, maybe you call them Mrs. this, Miss that, or you call them by their child's name. Like being on a first name basis with someone is not something that is common, and I don't know if that has something to do with my ability or inability to remember people's names, but I think there is something cultural about it, because I find that a lot of Africans suffer from that, and it really makes a difference. I know that when someone addresses me by my name, like there's a certain level of connection that you make with that person. You feel like that person has made an effort to remember your name and to call you by your name. So, and I've noticed one thing about Australians in general, like it could be common amongst, like, you know, other people from other countries, but I've noticed this about Australians, that they can say your name several times in a conversation. They can be like, you know, hi Nicolle, blah, blah, blah. So Nicolle, you know, Nicolle, like they keep mentioning your name, and there's something that does. It's like, I know for me, like when someone like mentions your name, there's a certain level of like respect that it conveys. It conveys that, you know, this person actually cares what your name is, and they're actually calling you by your name. They're identifying you. You're not just a random person. You're not just, you know, they're not just talking about you like hi and they're not mentioning your name. It just brings a certain weight to that conversation that I have noticed. And, you know, I've noticed that, you know, when I don't call, if someone is calling me by my name, like we're having a conversation and they keep mentioning my name and I've already forgotten their name, you can kind of tell, like I can feel the embarrassment and the, you know, just what I'm saying is not having as much an impact as if it would have had if I had mentioned this person's name and I keep mentioning their name, and when they see you, they greet you by your name. So I feel like it's something that contributes a lot to how people connect and even network, and how people remember you. If you've ever noticed, if you say morning to someone, like if you just exchange, you're passing each other, maybe it could be in the corridor at work, and just like morning, the answer is usually morning, and then you just go on your way. But if someone says good morning Nicolle, or good morning Sally, or good morning Tim, and then you reply and say you know, morning whatever, morning James, like it has this like level of where, I don't know, we're relating, and that conversation usually goes a step further. Like, oh, morning Jane, morning Tim, how are you? How's your day today? Like, it's easy to flow on from a conversation if you've addressed someone by their name and they've addressed you by their name, and it just builds a stronger connection. And it really helps when it comes to things like networking, when it just comes to things like relationship building. And for me, I found that if I'm not conscious about remembering someone's name, my brain's default is just to forget their name. It's like it wasn't even mentioned. And I really don't know why my brain does that, but remembering names is such a difficult thing for me. So one thing that I do, that if I forget to do this, I'll forget your name. But if I remember to do it, I remember people's names. Is if I'm being introduced to people, like if someone says like, hi, my name is Jane, in my mind I repeat it. I'm like, Jane. I have to say the name again. Even if I don't say it out loud, I have to say it to myself in my head. I'm like, Jane. And then they're like, oh, whatever, and then I have to say, oh Jane, I'm Nicolle. So I have to repeat it out loud, and I have to repeat it in my head in order for me to remember that person's name. And I found that when I do that, I usually remember the person's name. Even if we meet again like 2-3 months later, I remember their name. So it's only that initial thing. Once I get the name initially, I don't forget your name, even if we meet like a year or two after. The other day, I met a lady, lovely lady at my workplace who I hadn't seen for months, nearly, I probably like could be a whole year, and we only met once. And you know, she introduced herself to me and I introduced myself to her, and I repeated her name and I didn't forget her name. When I saw her, I greeted her by her name, and it was so lovely to see the smile on her face when I said her name, because I had seen her a long time ago. So she knew that I remembered her name, and it just built that connection that I really, really valued myself. So remembering someone's name is such an important thing, and there are ways to get past that. Like I said, for me, it has to do with repeating that person's name and mentioning it as much as possible while we're interacting. So if, once they say their name, they're like, hi, if they say, hi, I'm Sally, I'll have to say like, nice to meet you, Sally. Repeat the name, not just, oh, hi, I'm Nicole, nice to meet you. If I don't mention the name, it's game over. I won't remember your name. We can go on talking for months and months and I will not remember that you were Sally. I'll remember your face. One thing about me, I'm not going to forget a face. I'm not going to forget a face, and I'm not going to forget someone's voice. If I've spoken to you before, I'll remember your voice, most likely. And I'll remember your face. If I've come across you before, I'll remember your face. And I can usually connect it to where we met, or I can at least like recall that, hey, I've met you before. I've met you somewhere. Might not remember where, but I remember the face. But name, name is a whole nother dimension. Like I have to be so conscious about remembering names. And I find that there are certain situations where I find that remembering people's names is critical. One of those times is if you're new to a group, whatever group, it could be a new friendship group, a circle, whatever it is. If you're new to a group, remembering people's names is critical because it helps form that initial connection. If you come into a group and you forget people's names and they remember your name, and they just, I don't know, it just gives off this thing that you don't really care, or you don't respect them that to actually remember their names. So if you're being introduced to a new group of people, make sure you capture their name, repeat it to yourself, say it in your head, say it out loud, whatever it takes. Just make sure you remember those people's names. There have been times where I've been introduced to more than one person, could be 3 people at once, and I'm seeing them for the first time. Sometimes I actually I repeat their names. Sometimes I have to actually write them down. If I've got a notebook, I won't make it obvios. They'll be like, hi, I'm Sally. I'm like, oh, Sally. Hi, I'm Tim. I don't do it like that because that's weird. But when I get a chance, I try and record the names in my head. And when I get a chance, I'll just say, oh, Tim, John, Sally, Jane, whatever. I write the names down so that I can just help reinforce what their names are in my head, because I really value people. I really love when people feel respected, and I also value when I feel like people are respecting me. So I always like to reciprocate that. So I try as much as I can to make an effort to remember people's names. So important situations when you're new to a circle, when you started a new job. I have seen people who have started new in my workplace and they just remember my name. I just have that much more respect for those people. I'm like, man, you've been introduced to 20 different people and you remembered my name. I just value that so much, and I respect that person, and I'm more likely to greet that person and call them by their name and stuff like that. So I feel like those situations are very important when you're trying to make a good first connection, because I don't really believe in first impressions. I feel like an impression, the word impression is kind of fake to me. It's you're trying to come across a certain way. But if you're just being genuine and you just genuinely want to connect, you just want to make a good first connection with somebody. And what helps with that is when you exchange names and you remember each other's names and stuff like that, and try and use your names as much as possible. I remember my husband was on a call with this guy. We wanted to get a certain service from him, and because he was sitting quite close to me, I could hear, I could overhear the phone call. When this guy called, my husband introduced himself, whatever, and then this guy said my husband's name, I don't know, a couple of times in that conversation. and I could hear it. And I'm just like, when he got off the phone, I'm like, wow, that guy had such good customer service. And what stood out to me in his customer service was how he just kept mentioning my husband's name, even though it was their first interaction. So, you know, if you're running a business even, it just gives off that, you know, thing that you've got good customer service. You care about your clients. If you're calling them by their first name and you keep repeating their name, and you know, you just find opportunities in the conversations to say their name, it just, I don't know, it just builds that higher, bigger level of connection, and you feel like with that person, you know, you can have another conversation with them. Like, you want to have another conversation with them because you feel respected, you feel like they care, and who doesn't want to feel like that? So yes, to my fellow Africans, if you are struggling, if you struggle like me, I hope you can use some of these tips that I use to help remember people's names. And if you know the reasons why, or the reason why we struggle with this, please put it in the comments below, because it absolutely baffles me. Like, I just have no idea. I'm like, why? Out of all things, like, I know African culture is such a respectful culture, so it's not even coming from a level of disrespect. It's just this blank that we draw when someone tells us their names for the first time. And if you're not African and you're watching this video and you've experienced this from Africans, I can tell you just on my own behalf, on the behalf of other Africans, that it doesn't come from disrespect. It's not that that person doesn't care or doesn't respect you. It's just that somehow we just draw a blank when it comes to people's names. And one other example that I can give, like, that's something that a lot of Africans struggle with. If you're straight out of Africa, like you haven't lived in another country, and you know, you go to another country, something that I struggled with is making eye contact with people. When you're talking to people, to look people dead in the eye. I mean, for me, especially for like males, I don't know whether I know definitely it's a cultural thing, because you're taught, like, you're kind of told to like avoid eye contact, especially if you're talking to people who are older than you, to just like not look them dead in the eye. It's actually considered disrespectful to look someone dead in the eye if you're younger than them. Like, you know, it's like culturally, if you're looking at like traditional Shona culture, not like modernized culture, traditional Shona culture prevents eye contact when you're talking to adults. And they even say, like, you know, if you're paying your condolences to someone, like, you know, if someone has had a loved one pass away, when you say, you know, I'm sorry or whatever, you don't look them dead in the face, because that's considered like insensitive and disrespectful in my Shona culture. You actually have to look down when you say it, and that's considered a form of respect. So when I came to Australia now, you know, I thought, you know, when I was talking to my team leaders and managers, like, looking down and not looking them dead in the face was a form of respect. Because one thing about me, like, I'm a traditional girl. I am a traditional girl. I love my tradition, and I love traditional ways, and I love like, you know, incorporating traditional ways in my own life. So, you know, that respect, giving people respect by looking down, was a thing for me. So when I did that at work, like, people, like, I've shared this in a previous video where one of my managers put me aside and said, you know, it comes across like you're not interested or whatever when you don't look people in the eye. And when I started practicing looking people in the eye, I just the weirdest thing, I just thought it was so awkward, like when someone's talking to you, to just look at them dead in the eye. And I didn't know when to break the eye contact. So sometimes I'll just be looking at you like dead in the eye, and you're talking to me until it becomes weird, and then I'm like, okay, let me break the contact. But now I've kind of mastered the art of looking at someone and kind of breaking the contact, and then looking at them again and breaking the contact, but just maintaining a good level of eye contact. So that's another thing that I had to learn when I came to Australia. And the other one is remembering people's names. And those two things, I feel like, you know, they go hand in hand when it comes to building good connections, first connections and stuff like that. So I just wanted to share that, my personal struggle, and the struggle of many people around me who look like me, who are from the same place as me. They struggle with that. I just want to tell you, you are not alone, and there is a way to get over it. There is a way you can actually remember people's names. So Just remember, every time someone's introducing themselves to you, or every time someone's name is mentioned, just use those tips. Say it out loud, say it again to yourself in your head, and I hope it works for you as well as it has worked for me. All right, guys, that's all from me today, and I'll see you in my next video.